Hello again. I want to talk a little bit today about why so many of the people who arrive to live in Britain and other Western countries seem to be young, ill-educated and undisciplined men who end up in trouble with the authorities rather than respectable professional family types. As somebody who has had the experience of being an immigrant in somebody else's country, I think I might be able to shed a little light on this matter. 40 or 50 years ago, and it may well be the case now for all I know to the contrary, one would come across young Englishmen abroad who had more or less given up on their own country and turned up somewhere else to live. I have to say at once that these men were not a brilliant advertisement for England. They were often shiftless, idle, heavy drinking, cannabis smoking types who had no real interest in Spain, Cyprus, Israel, Saudi or whatever other country they ended up in. Many of them were drifters, and if other countries had not had strict laws about work permits, visas and so on, then I suspect that many of these English would have cheerfully settled down for good in some other country. If that other country had been prepared to give them a flat and some pocket money, rather than turfing them out of the country when they overstayed their welcome, then I have no doubt they would never have left. It wasn't just Englishmen, of course. You would come across Americans of the same kind, sometimes Swedes, Dutch, Germans as well. Mostly men, but with a sprinkling of women too. All these people had something in common. They had not made a brilliant success of things in their own country. All those young men I used to come across had not qualified as architects or doctors in their own countries. They hadn't even been to university, most of them. It was because they had nothing much going in their own country that they had taken a flight to the Middle East or wherever else and decided to see if things worked out better for them there than they had done in London or New York. It seldom did, and most of these people ended up being a nuisance in the country which they fetched up in. I need hardly add that people in America, Sweden or Holland who are respectable and married, with good professions and a decent way of life, did not go herring off abroad in this way. I've talked about this to give people an insight into the problems which we in Britain and other people in European countries are currently having with asylum seekers, once known more correctly as illegal immigrants. The majority of these people are young men, and they're leaving their own countries because they have nothing much going for them there and think their prospects might be brighter in Britain or Germany. There are no more refugees or asylum seekers than the kind of young men with whom I used to associate in other people's countries 45 years ago. The only difference is that whereas in those days we were liable to be hoofed out of Saudi or Cyprus at a moment's notice, the people who are coming to the West now are protected by all kinds of complicated laws and protocols, which makes it almost impossible to get rid of them. It is only by understanding the essential nature of this situation that we in Britain can really make sense of what is happening. We are surprised to find that an awful lot of these asylum seekers are shiftless customers who turn to petty crime and worse, but that's because these people were like this in their own country. That's why they left. There are brain surgeons in Lagos, Kampala and Islamabad, along with engineers and chartered accountants. But these people are not travelling across the English Channel on inflatable mattresses and makeshift rafts. What we're getting are the flotsam and jetsam of other countries. This is what is turning parts of Europe into third world slums. We are filling our countries up with the refuse of non-hopers, no-hopers from across Africa and Asia. If these people couldn't get on in their own countries, it's unlikely they'll be able to do so here. This is not a new problem. It began with the very first ship arriving at Tilbury over 70 years ago. Even then, it was not the successful professionals and family men who decided to pack in their lives in Jamaica and move to Britain. It was young men who had nothing much going for them in Kingston and were looking for an easier life. This is, by and large, the story of immigration to Britain since the end of the Second World War.